Hey everybody, video number 2 for the night. I'm Ken the Metal Professor, and I do a radio show in Valparaiso, Indiana called Mostly Metal, 103.1 FM, also streaming on WVLP.org, the TuneIn radio app. My show airs on Wednesdays, 10 p.m. to midnight, and Sundays, 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. These are U.S. Central Times. And over the last many months, I've been embedding top 10 lists into my show of top 10 favorite songs by this band or that band, alternating between metal and rock. And then I've been placing these lists on my webpage with links to the YouTube videos for the songs. That webpage is metalprofessor.com. Plug. And also, I'm doing these videos, and now that I've started them, I have this list-making completist mentality that doesn't let me stop. And I got myself a little bit behind, and the video I just did for Nightingale, that that show aired 2 weeks ago. The Foghat show just aired this week, and then coming up next week I'm going to be doing Power Quest. So I could have just said, I'm not going to do Nightingale and Foghat videos because the show's already out there and who cares anyway, but it would bug me if I had videos for all the rest and didn't have one for these. So here I am catching up. So what I'm going to do with Foghat is, like with Nightingale, I'm going to try to dole out my preference ranking for the albums and my top 10 favorite songs sort of at the same time instead of doing one and then doing the other. Foghat has a crap ton of albums. When you go and look at their whole discography, it's more than I thought it was. Now, when I had all of their original, that first burst of albums where they went year after year, from like 72 or 73 to 80, I'm going to peek and look here, 83. I think there might have been a gap of a year in there somewhere, but otherwise it was just year, album. I mean, they were consistently putting stuff out every single year, which was not uncommon back in the 70s and early 80s, I guess. So I owned the first 12 or 13 if you count Foghat Live, which is one of the best rock and roll live albums that I owned until the basement flood of 2000, whatever it was, that took all my vinyl away from me. But I bought the remastered Bearsville collection of those first 13 albums. So just in terms of transparency, like I'm a politician and who cares, but I do now own digital versions of those first 13 albums, but I will be mentioning some albums that my only exposure to them is online through Spotify, or in one case YouTube, and having to go there and check out the track list. And that'll be the batch that I'm going to mention first, because of their total 16 studio albums now, the most recent 4 are my least favorite ones, and so I'm just gonna toss them out there at once. There are no songs in my top 10 list from these albums, so let me just jump in. My least favorite Foghat album at number 16 is Family Jewels. This was released in 2003. This is the first one that did not have Lonesome Dave on vocals. A couple of good songs. She's Got a Ring in His Nose. That's a great title and fun lyrics. And Made Up My Mind are good. But it's kind of a raw sounding album. It's very bluesy. I mean, Foghat went through a couple of phases where when they first started out, they were what I would call, probably incorrectly, but I'm going to say it anyway, rocky blues. It was kind of almost rooted in blues, but heavy and with very much rock overtones, but the blues rock influence is pretty pervasive. And then they had, this era of bluesy rock, where they were a rock band where their songs had, a little bit of a bluesy flavoring. And on these more recent albums, they sort of gone back into just heavy-duty blues rock, instead of, rocky blues. I mean, very, very blues influenced, almost Stevie Ray Vaughan-ish at times. Family Jewels, it's not as interesting to me as any other one. So that's what I'm going to put at 16. At 15, Return of the Boogeyman. Now this is their, I can't call it a comeback. But after their first 13 Bearsville albums, that they just went and released all of them, and then they were gone for a while. And the original crew came back in 1994 with Return of the Boogeyman. My favorite song on that album is Jump That Train. There are several covers on that album. They have a remake of their own, I Just Want to Make Love to You. And to me, that's, I've seen other bands do that, where they do a new version of one of their original songs as a track mixed in with other new material. I don't like that. That seems to me is just a, filling space. Say Testament, what did they do? First Strike, Still Deadly, right? Where they did an entire album where they went back and they said, we can do these songs different and possibly better, so let's give it a shot. Now that's a cohesive project. I don't really like, let's go back and redo this one song and put it on this album. Return of the Boogeymen, by the way, is the one album of theirs that you're not going to find on Spotify. I went to YouTube, and fortunately enough, people had posted songs that I was able to listen through the whole album. Numbers 14 and 13, they could go in either order. Under the Influence and Last Train Home. This is with Charlie Huff of Ted Nugent Band fame, now on the mic and guitar. Under the Influence from 2016, I'm a Rock and Roller, Long Time Coming. Those are good tunes. Last Train Home, I think I like a little bit better. From 2010, Needle and Spoon. The 495 Boogie is a great song. Shake Your Money Maker, silly title, but kind of a fun tune. These two songs are just really slickly produced. So if you like good sounding hard blues rock, go check these out. I would never tell anybody not to listen to any of these. They're just not my favorites as compared to the rest of the Foghat discography. Okay, so those the four most recent, but still almost actually more than 20 years old in the case of Return to the Boogeyman. None of my favorite songs come out of that list. Okay, next I'm going to mention a trio of albums that I put them together in my head because they're all kind of samey, and as they sound very much alike. They were the last three of that wave of releases from the early 70s to the early to mid 80s. We're talking about In the Mood for Something Rude, which is my number 12, Zigzag Walk, which is my number 11, and Girls to Chat and Boys to Bounce, which is my number 10. Bustin' Up or Bustin' Out off of In the Mood for Something Rude from 1982 is a good tune, I guess. The rest of the album, I'm not sure how much I like it. Now, these I did have on vinyl, so when I go back and listen to these songs again, I can remember them all right away, which is good. But these three don't compare to the rest of the discography. Zigzag Walk was their last of their first batch of Bearsville albums from 1983. Jenny Don't Mind is good. Silent Treatment I like a lot. I certainly like this one better than In the Mood for Something Rude. Girls to Chat and Boys to Bounce, of those three, I like it the most. From 1981, Delayed Reaction and Second Childhood are really good. These are where they're just rocky. They're just a rock band, maybe a little pop in places, with a little bit of southern or bluesy influence. And the poppiest of the pop songs is Sing About Love off of Girls to Chat and Boys to Bounce. And I love that song. I dig it. It's got a good melody. In fact, it flirted with being in my top 10 list. So I would call that 10.5. But other than that, there are no songs from this trio. Now, for my top 9 albums, these are the core Foghat discography from the good old days. The album Tight Shoes, I probably ought to lump in with the three I just talked about, because it sounds more like them than it does the earlier Foghat albums. This is where there was a personnel change. But that one's going to be at number 8 for me. At number 9, I'm going to put their debut album, Foghat, from 1972, when I was 6 years old. There are good songs on that debut album, Foghat. The difficulty I have putting the album higher is that I find it very hit or miss in terms of the ones that I like, and it's not entirely purely a Foghat album in that the best songs on it are cover tunes. The songs that they wrote for themselves are not the ones that I like the best, which is kind of weird. And so that's why I don't move it higher. Like, I Just Want to Make Love to You, that's one of their most favorite songs. They didn't write it. Maybelline, they do a great job on it. It's a toe tapper. They didn't write it. A Hole to Hide In, I think, is theirs, but that's a good tune. There are other good songs on it. But that one comes in for me at number 9. Okay, number 8, Tight Shoes. Now, the reason I like Tight Shoes more than other people may is because that was my gateway to Foghat, right? I'd heard Foghat on the radio, but the first album that I actually owned was Tight Shoes. I found it in a discount bin, probably in Woolworths. And I remember going to a store in our local shopping mall repeatedly to flip through their discount bins, and that's where I would find, like, I found some old ELP there, Horse Lips, I found some of those albums there, and I found a handful of Foghat albums, but Tight Shoes is the first one that I got. So that was the first Foghat album I had that I would listen to from beginning to end over and over, and that's, for better or for worse, what I had entrenched in my head as my point of comparison for every other Foghat that I would hear, right? So people that came in with them back at the very beginning, they're going to prefer the earlier albums, and I prefer the earlier albums too, but I think some people might kind of put their nose up at Tight Shoes, and I just don't. Stranger in My Hometown is a great song. Baby Can I Change Your Mind, which is number 9. So we're finally getting to my top 10 list. No Hard Feelings is a nice punchy little tune. It's a popish or bluesy rocky blues album. There's nothing wrong with it. It's fine, right? It's an okay song, and it's got some good tunes on it, and there's nothing to complain about. So that's my number 8. Number 7, Rock and Roll Outlaws from 1974. 8 Days on the Road, Dreamer. Trouble in My Way, a nice short blues acoustic-y tune. It's not really acoustic, but it's kind of mellower. That's my number 8 in my top 10 list. Rock and Roll Outlaw is a good song too. Rock and Roll Outlaws, Rock and Roll, and Energized to me kind of form a trio, and for whatever reason I think of those 3 albums together, and that's my least favorite of the 3, but very close to that. Number 6 is Energized from 1974. Also, Rock and Roll Outlaws was in 74. Honey Hush, the lead track, was going to be in my top 10 list, but I made a rule for myself, and I haven't done this for other bands, but I made a rule that Foghat does so many covers, or maybe they're not covers, but maybe they're songs written by people not in the core band. I decided that I was only going to put songs that were Foghat band member songs in my top 10. And maybe I don't know enough about the band to know that there were people involved with the band in a more minor role that I just, they weren't in the photos or whatever. But Honey Hush was not written by, Peverett or any of those guys. So it was going to be in my top 10 list because I love that song, but I left it out for that reason. However, Step Outside, Take a Ride, comes in at number 7. I love the chorus of that song. And Home in My Hand is really good too, but it's not in my top 10 list. At number 5, maybe this is blasphemy, but at number 5 I'm putting Fool for the City. This was released in 1975. This is probably their most famous album. It certainly has their most famous songs, like the title track, which is my number 4 favorite Foghat song. So even if I'm putting this album lower than people think I should, hey, at least one of the songs is in my top 10 list, right? Slow Ride is a good song. It's probably their most famous. It's probably the one that's covered the most by bar bands all over the world. I'm tired of it, and Slow Ride is kind of a slow song, and so even though I've always appreciated it, if I go to a jukebox and I've got my choice between Fool for the City or Slow Ride, I'm picking Fool for the City, Fool for the City every single time. My Babe is a good upbeat tune too. Not in my list though. But anyway, Fool for the City, the album, at number 5, Fool for the City, the song, at number 4. You're going to see now, and if you're thinking about what's coming up, what I've left for the top 3 or 4 here, it's pretty obvious. The type of Foghat that I prefer is the heaviest Foghat, the one where it's just real thick and hit you in the face rock and roll. Maybe the bluesy influences are damped down. Hey, what can I say? These albums are my favorites because they appeal to me the most. At number 4, Stone Blue from 1978. The title track is awesome. Sweet Home Chicago, cover tune. High on Love. Now, High on Love and Sing About Love, very, very poppy, but they make you sing along. You can't help tapping your toes. That would have been number 11 if I continued my list farther down. Midnight Madness is my number 5. I love the heaviness of this tune. Number 3 is their second album, Rock and Roll. Some people will say it's a second self-titled album, but it has the image of the rock and the roll on the cover, so it's parentheses rock and roll, or it's rock and roll parentheses Foghat, because the only text on the album is Foghat. 1973, you've got Long Way to Go, It's Too Late, and Helping Hand, which is my number 10 favorite Foghat song. Number 2, I'll put Night Shift from 1976. Drive and Wheel, the title track, Night Shift, number 6 on my list. I'll Be Standing By, Burning the Midnight Oil, and Don't Run Me Down. Just the chugging in that song just gets me going. It's my number 3 favorite Foghat song. So, those Drive and Wheel, it's not on my list, but Driving Wheel is a driving song. The title track and Don't Run Me Down in particular, just that go get it rock and roll in that song, the heaviness is what really appeals to me. And then my number 1 Foghat album, I've seen another list online recently for Foghat, and this was buried much farther down, so I don't know if I'm an outlier for this, but Boogie Motel is my favorite Foghat album from 1979. Somebody's Been Sleeping in My Bed. Again, I tripped myself up with that song because this one was number 6 in my top 10 list until I realized that, hey, that's written by somebody outside the band too. Again, I don't know if I think somebody mentioned online in some other location that it was a new version of another British band's song. So that made me go check the attributes of the song, and sure enough, it was not written by their usual writing crew in Foghat, so it's not theirs originally, so I took it out of my list, which is sad because it's a great tune. The title track, Boogie Motel, is a great song, and Nervous Release, I love how that song builds. I love the end of that song and the way it sort of fades out towards the end. Nervous Release is my number 2, and Boogie Motel is my number 1 favorite Foghat song. And for me, it's pretty rare when I make these top 10 lists that I will have 2 songs from the same album. I very commonly have 2 songs from the same album in the list, but to have 2 songs from the same album being number 1 and number 2, I don't know that that's happened yet in all these lists that I've made. So obviously, this has to be my favorite Foghat album. Whew! 16 albums. That was hard work. But there you go. Boogie Motel is my favorite Foghat album. Nervous Release, Don't Run Me Down. If you haven't heard Foghat before and you want to hear them at their heaviest and most powerful, check out those tracks. If you want to try their more, kind of slower, not necessarily slow, but slower and more textured and more leisurely, check out Fool for the City. I mean, everybody's heard Fool for the City. Helping Hand, Step Outside, even songs that aren't on this list like Road Fever. Go check those out. See if you like those. Trouble in My Way, my number 8 song, is just a sweet little mellow tune that you could, if you don't like the heavier Foghat, maybe you'll find some attachment to those songs. They have a lot of versatility. When you think about it, their bandwidth of the style of music that they play is still pretty narrow, but within that bandwidth, they have a lot of versatility. You don't make 16 albums if that's not the case. So, thanks for paying attention to my babbling, and if you saw the screen switch colors, it's because my screens have gone blank because I haven't touched anything for too long, but I don't need them now, so I'm not going to pause and start them back up again. So next week, sometime soon, I'm going to do my top 10 favorite songs and preference ranking for the British cheese metal band Power Quest. And then after that, for better or for worse, I'm going to try to tackle Yes. But I will admit that I'm going to cheat. When I do Yes, I will give my preference ranking of their 19, 20 studio albums. I will include Anderson, Bruford, Wakeman, Howe in that list because, arose by any other name. For my top 10 lists, I've actually made a top 20 list, and what I'm going to do is present my top 10 favorite Yes songs that are less than 7 minutes long, and my top 10 favorite Yes songs that are longer than 7 minutes long. That's my cheat for that one. So it saved me from having to make some very, very painful decisions. So I hope you come back and listen.